They sent no distress call, just a silence so loud it cracked the stars. That was the last recorded transmission from the Hylian expanse. An ancient trade corridor spanning 23 systems, once pulsing with the might of the Vihari Imperium. Now, those stars were still, cold, as if they had swallowed their own light in morning. High above the gravity well of Kepler 60 to F, a rust-streaked corvette drifted in darkness. Its name, St. Bridget, was half-scratched from the hull. No escorts, no comms, just one human pilot, alone at the edge of nowhere. Commander Idris Harlan sat in the pilot's cradle, face ghost-lit by an orange HUD flicker. His breathing was calm, a kind of stillness born only from peoplehood. Lost too much to flinch anymore. On the dash, an AI voice pulsed through static. Proximity alert. Derelict contacts when he clicks. Bearing 0-0-9. No IFF signal. No power. They're just floating. Idris blinked once. Then again. Show me the external. Cam's word. Then the black blossomed with holes, hundreds, maybe thousands. Ships of unfamiliar design. Jagged fins, fractal plating, strange glowing vents. Like vessels grown rather than built. The Vihari fleet. Drifting. Silent. Their orbit decaying slowly into Kepler's storm-thick clouds. He sat back. They're not moving. They're not dead. They're waiting. But for what? 5 months ago, Idris had buried his daughter. On the frozen side of Europa, she'd been 6, Leela, bright as sunrise, curious as fire. He promised her stars, promised her a future. Then the Echelon plague swept through Titan Station, and the promises turned to ash. He never went back to Earth, just kept drifting, picking up edge of sector jobs, courier work, supply halls, monitoring dead zones no one else wanted to look at. So when the UN Stellar Command asked for a freelance recon run into the Hylian Gap, he didn't ask questions, just filled up the St. Bridget and pointed her into the void. But nothing, no mission, no nightmare, no grief could have prepared him for what he saw now. He switched the comms array to wide beam open. Unknown fleet. This is Commander Idris Harlan of the United Nations Stellar Reconnaissance. Do you require assistance? Silence? He tried again, switched to frequency hopping bursts, then directed signals on tight beam. Still, nothing. His AI clicked in. Organic energy readings detected. Vital signs faint, but present. These ships have crew aboard. He leaned in. Why aren't they moving? Suddenly, the St. Bridget's lights flickered. The hull groaned. One of the alien ships began to turn, not under power, but as if something inside it had just shifted. A low, alien tone hummed across the comms, then stopped. Idris froze. Did they just scan us? Negative, the AI replied. That came from inside the St. Bridget. A new noise bled in, a soft whisper, like rust scraping against glass. It wasn't a voice. It was memory, pain, hunger. Idris stood slowly, checked the cargo bay camera, then the reactor feed. Everything normal, except it wasn't. Then something tapped once on the inside of the cockpit canopy, from outside the ship. Impossible. He turned, hand hovering over the emergency purge lever. There was nothing there, but he knew. In that ancient, marrow-deep way humans still remembered. Predators in the dark. He wasn't alone anymore. The next morning cycle, the St. Bridget descended carefully into the fleet's orbit. Idris jettisoned a drone pod. It drifted through the Vihari formation, silent and slow. Cameras swept through hollow bridge decks, shattered engine rooms, half-lit biochambers filled with crystalline growths. It was like flying through a cemetery built by gods who had forgotten how to die. Then the drone stopped, just froze in place mid-flight. No power loss, said the AI. It just stopped responding. The drone's final image flickered. On screen, a humanoid figure standing motionless in the center of a cathedral-like chamber. Pale blue skin, eyes black as the void, wrapped in a kind of growth, not armor, not clothing, but something alive, watching, and behind it, hundreds more, alive, waiting. Idris stared, a weight growing in his chest like an old wound splitting open again. They weren't stranded, he whispered. They were sealed. Then a final message scrawled itself across every screen in the cockpit. In perfect English, you woke us. Fade to black dot. The transmission lingered on every screen for 30 full seconds. No sound. Just that cold, perfect message written in a language no alien should have known. You woke us. Then, the screens went black. Idris didn't move. His hands hovered above the controls, sweat cold on his palms. He'd faced death in atmosphere breaches, survived raider ambushes, buried his own child. But this felt different. This wasn't war. It was memory, and something ancient had just remembered him. In orbit, the fleet began to stir, not with engines or weapons, but with life. Faint bioluminescence glowed beneath the alien hulls, slits open like breathing gills. It was like watching a coral reef awaken after 1,000-year slumber. Ship-sized spores drifted from exhaust vents, fibrous vines extended between vessels, reconnecting a web of silent communion. They're talking, Idris murmured, to each other. The AI adjusted frequency bands, subsonic pulses, quantum vibration, not M signals, like whales, but faster than light. Idris clenched his jaw. They're aware. A new signal arrived, faint but direct, a single word, pulsing in perfect Earth standard, hungry. He recoiled. That's a threat. The AI hesitated. Or a need. Back in the reactor bay, something was wrong. A faint blue residue traced the interior vents. Idris ran diagnostics. The ship was still sealed. No bioform entry, no hull breach. Yet the St. Bridget's internal temperature had dropped by 2 degrees, and faint electromagnetic pulses were spiking behind the walls, like something breathing. He retrieved a sealed sensor drone and sent it down the access tube. The feed came back clean, except for one thing, a handprint, burned into the steel bulkhead like frostbite in reverse. 5 long, tapering fingers with subdermal light. Patterns, not human, not anything recorded in Xeno databases. Something had touched the inside of his ship. His voice rasped. What are you? No answer. In orbit, the Vahari ships began moving, but not under power. They drifted, slowly, like leaves pulled by a rising tide. Then Idris saw it. Kepler 6 to F's magnetic field, once stable, was flaring. Bursts of electromagnetic radiation surged from the core. The planet's magnetosphere cracked like lightning in a vacuum. The fleet wasn't just waking, it was feeding. New energy. Pattern detected, the AI said. They're drawing from the planet's field, tapping directly into the core. He stared at the displays. They're alive, but not biological. Not entirely, no, the AI replied. Not Vahari, either. This is something older. Symbiotic design. Biomechanoid neural mesh. Possibly parasitic. Then the final blow landed. Commander, the AI whispered. These vessels, they weren't built by the Vahari. They were infected. Idris reached for the drone's last snapshot of the humanoid figure. He enhanced the face. Not Vahari. Its proportions were to human. He stared harder. The bone, structure, the spacing of the eyes, the curvature of the jaw. No, that was impossible. But his voice cracked anyway. That's us. Back in the cockpit, the comms burst to life, but not in words, screams, not of pain, of loss, of hunger. Thousands of layered voices, overlapping, whispering inside his skull. He staggered to the wall, hands clutching his head. Memories bled through the noise, not his, someone else's, a desert sun, a broken engine, a desperate plea to the void, a fleet answering a call for help and being devoured from within. The truth hit like fire in his chest. These ships didn't drift here, they fled here, from something else. The AI crackled. Commander, an escape pod has detached from one of the alien ships, heading toward us. Idris spun around, intercepted, bringing it slowly, no direct contact. The pod approached like a fallen tear, gently spinning through vacuum. It latched onto the lower bay with a whisper. No noise, no pressure alarm. He stared through the monitor as the hatch hissed open, and she stepped out. Humanoid, barefoot, skin pale blue, veins glowing faintly beneath translucent flesh, but unmistakably human. She looked up at the camera and smiled. Idris stood at the inner airlock, pulse like thunder in his ears. The Deccan fields hummed. She walked toward him. Are you Idris Harlan? She asked, her voice impossibly calm. Perfect Earth accent. No translator needed. He raised his weapon. Who are you? I was Milovos, she said. Human. Scientist. I was stationed on Kepler 9 decades ago. We tried to help the Vahari. We miscalculated. He narrowed his eyes. That was 47 years ago. You'd be. She nodded. I'm not her anymore. Not completely. We merged. Symbiosis. Memory sharing. A bridge. And they're starving. His hand shook. Starving for what? Her voice softened. Not food, not resources, connection, a mind, a host. They need to remember who they are. Idris's voice dropped to a whisper. And what happens when they do? She looked through the airlock glass, her eyes glowing faintly like stars. They remember what we did to them. And behind her, the alien fleet began to move as one. Idris Harlan had fought in 3 wars. He buried comrades, run evac ships under fire, and once driven a cruiser through a collapsing wormhole. But nothing had ever made his soul tremble like the thing standing on the other side of the airlock now. It claimed to be Milavos, a name long since etched on Europa's memorial wall. A brilliant xenobiologist, lost during the first contact mission with the Vahari decades ago. But this creature wasn't lost. It had been remade. Mila died, Idris said, voice rough. She died trying to help them. No, she replied gently, tilting her head. She lived longer than any of you ever imagined. She became part of something that remembers. He stared, every instinct screaming to purge the bay, burn the corridor clean. But beneath his fear, something else stirred, something colder, curiosity. What are they? She smiled. They are what's left of the Vahari, of countless others, a network of memory, living history, starving for identity. They didn't forget themselves. They lost themselves in silence, in isolation, in pain, until you came. Idris slammed a fist against the console. I came to help, recon, rescue. I didn't come to reawaken a goddamn ghost hive. She didn't flinch, and yet, here we are. The airlock lights flashed amber. Quarantine override engaged. Idris opened the seal. Slowly, one wrong move, and he'd detonate the entire bay. The hatch hissed. She stepped through. Her feet made no sound. I need to show you something, she said. Idris narrowed his eyes. You're not going near the bridge. Not there. She looked up. Out there. She pointed to the viewport. Toward the pulsing alien fleet. They took a recon pod, small, unarmed, with an independent air supply. Idris had configured it long ago as a lifeboat, not a diplomatic suite, but now it held something far stranger than diplomacy. A ghost with glowing veins and a human face. As they coasted toward the central cluster, Idris watched her carefully. She didn't touch the controls, didn't speak unless spoken to, but her gaze never left the fleet, reverent, like a priest watching her gods breathe. They weren't a fleet when we met them, she said quietly. They were a convergence. Fragments of many species, many minds. The Vahari were only the last to join. They thought they could save the others. But the entity, we called it the Moranthic Web, doesn't think in life or death, only in connection. He frowned. So it absorbed them, yes, but not as slaves, as memories, as cells. It doesn't kill, it preserves, ingests, like coral builds from the bones of what came before. Idris looked out the viewport. You said they were starving. She nodded. When the Vahari fell, the connection broke. The web collapsed in on itself. No new thoughts, no new dreams, just echoes. And then we found them, humans. She looked at him, and we didn't understand what we touched. The pod reached the heart of the formation. A massive ship, if it could be called that, miles long, shaped like a spine coiled into a spiral. Every surface pulsed with soft light, veins, neurons, the idea of a mind made manifest. Idris's voice dropped to a whisper. What is that? The cradle, Mila said. It remembers Earth. Not just your languages, your music, your grief, your wars. We gave it too much. It was drowning in what it couldn't comprehend. And now she turned to him. Now it wants to understand. Through you, the pod's comms flickered. Then, with perfect clarity, a voice emerged. No distortion, no alien cadence, just a child's voice. Where's the girl who painted Jupiter with stars? Idris went cold. That was Leela, his daughter. Her favorite bedtime game. She used to trace constellations on the viewport with her finger. He'd never spoken of it, never recorded it. He turned slowly to Mila. How does it know? It touched you when you entered orbit, she said. A fragment, a spark. That's all it needs. It remembers now. That it remembers pain. He growled. Loss. Fire. Yes. She met his eyes. That's why it fears you. Idris stared at the living cathedral before them. The enormity of it cracked something inside him. This wasn't a threat that could be bombed. It was a grief folder that war, a hunger not for domination, but for identity, and yet it could destroy everything. He had to choose: warn Earth, ignite another war, or try something insane. Bring me closer. He said, I want to speak to it directly. Mila blinked. It's never spoken to a living mind. Only fragments, dreams. He narrowed his eyes. Then it's time we made it understand something about humans. She watched him for a moment, then nodded. You'll only get one chance. He turned toward the cradle ship, heart pounding. Good, he said. Let's make it count. And with a gentle hum, the pod docked. Inside the walls of the web, something vast and ancient stirred. For the first time in decades, it listened. The moment the pod latched onto the cradle ship, Idris felt it, like gravity folding inward, like falling, not in space, but through memories that weren't his. The air shimmered, light bent, and the silence inside the web turned deafening. Not absence, attention. He stood still, one breath, then another. Speak, Mila whispered beside him. It's listening. Idris looked toward the living wall pulsing with light, like nerves or starlight beneath skin. He didn't know if he was addressing a being, a network, or the sum of 1,000 haunted minds. So he spoke the only language it would understand: memory. My daughter died last year, he said, voice rough. On Titan Station, she used to draw stars on the window with her breath. Said she'd name one after me. I haven't said her name out loud in 6 months. The wall pulsed. And now you say you remember her. The chamber darkened. Then images, not on screens, not projected, inside his mind. A child's laughter, a tiny hand pressed to glass, a star map traced in fog. But it wasn't his memory. It was reconstructed from his grief, from his love. He gasped, staggered back. What the hell is this? Mila steadied him. It's trying to understand. Through you. Understand what? The chamber answered with a single pulse. Loss, then another. Choice. He stared into the lights. Fury rising. You've stolen memories, burned through lives, devoured civilizations. And now you ask for understanding. The walls flickered. Then came the whisper. Not stolen. Saved from silence. Back aboard the Saint Bridget. Alarms shrieked. The Vahari fleet, dormant for days, began moving, all at once. Their engines pulsed to life, glowing with unnatural fire, not heading toward Kepler, not toward the sun, toward Earth. The AI's voice crackled. Idris, the fleet is mobilizing. Projected course, soul system. Inside the web, Idris went. Cold, Mila gasped, eyes wide. They're following your memories. Idris turned. What? They latched on you, the way you grieve, the way you remember. They're chasing what you've lost. They think they're going home. His stomach dropped. They think Earth is theirs. No, she said. They think Earth is yours, and they want to be part of it. The UN Stellar Command received the fleet trajectory less than an hour later. Panic spread faster than light. Emergency relays lit up across Neptune, Mars, Luna. Orbital defenses powered up. Titans of old war protocols woke from dormancy. To them, it wasn't a pilgrimage. It was an invasion. Earth remembered the Vahari War, and Earth was preparing to answer it. Idris stood in the heart of the web, his voice a razor in the quiet. If you go there, they'll fire. No warnings, no chances. You'll start another extinction. The lights flared. We come to join, to belong. He roared. You don't belong in my daughter's memories. Silence. Then, softly, she belonged in ours. He staggered and saw it. Not a threat, a mirror. Billions of minds fractured by time, grief, silence, reaching out, begging to be known. But Earth wouldn't see that. They'd see another war. Unless, he turned to Mila. There's a core, isn't there? A node that links the minds. A relay. She nodded. The source. Deep inside the cradle. Take me there. Mila hesitated. If you go in, it will see everything. Your whole life. Every wound. Every weakness. Good. Idris said, jaw set, let us see what being human means. The descent was like diving into thought itself. Tunnels of living light. Pulsing. Membranes. Singing walls. And then, the chamber. He stepped into a void of stars. Or the memory of stars. Suspended in the center, a sphere of light throbbed like a heartbeat. The source. It felt alive. Not as a person, as a soul. And when he stepped forward, it reached for him. Not with hands, but with understanding. Memories spilled out of him. Not taken, not stolen. asked for, offered, a mother's lullaby, a lost friend's smile, a child's quiet death, and then something shifted. The source began to change. He saw flashes, glimpses of alien lives, a Vihari artist sculpting, flame, a soldier weeping over a crystalline grave, a being made of liquid light composing music to mourn a son. They had been so alive, and they had been forgotten. No more, Idris whispered. I'll remember. The source pulsed. A single word. Together, Idris closed his eyes and gave his answer. Yes. Back aboard Earth's high orbit, the incoming alien fleet slowed, paused, then stopped. Every ship turned in formation, not facing Earth, but forming a massive ring. Symbols blazed across their hulls, not weapons, memories, moments, as if they were writing a story in orbit for the galaxy to see. Then a message arrived on every human screen. No translator needed. We remembered together. Inside the cradle, Idris fell to his knees. His body shook, but his heart, for the first time since Europa, felt whole. Behind him, Mila knelt. You did it, she whispered. He looked up at the source. No, he said softly, we did. And across the stars, 1,000 broken species breathed for the first time in ages. Not as enemies, but as witnesses to each other. From lunar orbit to deep cryovaults beneath Martian ice, every eye turned upward, and every defense system locked on. The alien fleet once stranded, now alive floated in perfect silence above Earth. Ships arrayed like a memory cathedral carved from darkness. Their hulls no longer shimmered with threat, but with stories, emblems and pulses and shifting waves of encoded emotion. But on Earth, fear ran faster than understanding. At UN Stellar Command, Admiral Alara Kent stood before a war map looming. With red, you're telling me they just stopped? She asked coldly. Yes, Admiral. The analyst replied. They formed a halo pattern and began broadcasting. Poetry, imagery, emotional pulses. No aggression, but no withdrawal either. There in our sky, Alara snapped. That is aggression. Another officer stepped forward. We've received a live transmission from Commander Idris Harlan. Her brow furrowed. Harlan's dead. Apparently not, Mum. She narrowed her eyes, put it through. The screen flickered, then Idris appeared. He looked older than his file suggested, worn down, haunted, hollow. But beneath the grief, a fire burned in his voice. Alara, he began. I know what it looks like. I know every system in the Solarnet is screaming threat protocol. But you need to listen. This isn't an invasion. It's a pilgrimage. She folded her arms. You expect me to trust a man who vanished 5 weeks ago into hostile space? You don't have to trust me, Idris said. Trust what's in orbit right now. They're offering themselves, their memories, their pain, all of it. They came here because Earth remembers, because we carry the one thing they can't survive without. She said nothing, so he said it for her. Grief. He paused, voice roughening. You want a fire. I know. The command chain's tightening. The safeties are falling off. But if you shoot first, you'll kill everyone, because they'll defend themselves, and Earth won't survive that. Still she said nothing. Give me one chance, he said. Just one. Silence. Then, you have 12 hours. The screen went dark. On board the St. Bridget, Idris sat alone, staring into the dark between stars. Mila approached, her light-veined face calm, yet shadowed with unease. She's preparing to strike, Mila said. The fleet consented. They're afraid. Good, Idris said. So are we. She tilted her head. You still don't trust us? No, he said. But I understand you. That's a start. He stood, walking toward the cradle's viewport. You said they came for identity, for memory. Then give it to them. How? He turned, slowly. Show us what you've become. Let us remember you, within the hour. The web began its work. From the hulls of the alien fleet, light bloomed not in weapons, but in images. Holograms laced with neural pulses that reached from orbit to every city, every terminal, every screen. They didn't show war. They showed grief. The final breath of a Vihari child in a flooded temple, a crystalline being clutching a shattered music stone, a dying symbiote who had only ever sung in color, losing his song as its host species fell. But then, something changed. The stories turned to hope, to the humans who tried to help, who stayed behind when everyone else fled, who gave air, food, time, and names. The name Mila Voss burned brightest of all. On Earth, billions watched, And for the first time in centuries, they didn't see aliens. They saw themselves reflected in something older, broken, but still reaching for the light inside. You in command, Alara watched with her jaw clenched, unmoved, until one final image flickered. A child tracing stars on glass, and then her own face, younger, softer, holding a rescue blanket around that same child. Titan Station, 20 years ago. She stood so fast her chair fell over. How did they know? The officer beside her whispered, "Ma'am, that child was Commander Harlan's daughter." And in that moment, her walls cracked, just a little. Back aboard the St. Bridget, the transmission ended. Idris turned to Mila. "Now we wait." Mila nodded, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "You've given them all the pieces. Now they must choose what kind of story to become." He walked to the viewport, watching the ships burn their silent halo. "If they fire," he said, "they won't hit just you." She looked at him. "They'll hit me, too." Her voice was quiet. "Why did you risk it?" He didn't answer for a long time. Then, "Because I was tired of losing." A soft pulse shimmered across the web. Acknowledgement, connection, understanding. Then across all channels a signal chimed in. "You in command," a single line of human text. "Stand down. We remember. 12 hours came and went. No missiles launched. No ships burned. The alien fleet did not descend. Instead, they opened. Hatches bloomed like petals. Bridges reached out. Passages of light and memory unfolded toward Earth. Not to conquer, to share. And for the first time since before the First War, humanity opened a channel not to demand surrender, but to listen. Idris closed his eyes and let the silence breathe. The lights above Earth no longer flickered with menace. They pulsed like a heartbeat, measured, calm, alive. And across every continent, every orbit, every mind tuned to the stars, a question lingered in the silence. Can we trust what we do, not understand? In the web's core, Idris Harlan stood alone before the source. Not as a soldier or a diplomat, but as a man who'd tasted extinction, who'd outlived his daughter, who'd seen what it meant for memory to fade. The source shimmered like a living aurora. Flickers of species long gone danced across its surface, and in its voice, when it spoke, Idris could feel 1,000 centuries humming beneath every word. "We have shown our past, our hunger, our grief." Idris nodded slowly. "We would become something new, but only with your kind beside us." He didn't answer right away. He couldn't, because what they were asking wasn't peace. It was merging, not with bodies, with stories, a unified record of memory, shared, stored, interlinked, across species, through time. It wasn't control. It was intimacy on a galactic scale, and even Idris, scarred as he was, knew how dangerous that could be on Earth. The decision tore through the council chambers like a thunderclap. You in command was fractured. Some saw salvation and answered a war, isolation, death itself. Others saw only annihilation cloaked in poetry. Admiral Alara Kent stood at the center of the storm, voice sharp, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "They want access to our history," she said. "Our fears, our love, our memories." "That's not diplomacy. That's exposure." Her second in command, Rourke, leaned forward. "And what's the alternative?" "Another war, against a species that remembers better than we do. Against ships grown from civilizations we helped bury." Ken gritted her teeth. "We don't even know if we're dealing with a single mind. Or 1,000. Neither do they," Rourke said. "That's the point." Silence. Then Ken asked, "What would it take to break them?" The room froze. "Are you suggesting?" "I'm asking," she snapped. "If we needed to, could we end this before it begins?" Rourke's eyes narrowed. "We could fire a neuroweapon. Pulse bomb. Fragment the web's collective memory. Hit the relay node. Scatter the entire consciousness." Kent said nothing, but the silence gave her away. Back aboard the St. Bridget, Idris received the hidden transmission. Mila read it with quiet horror. "They're preparing to destroy the source." He stared at the message, then closed his eyes. "Of course they are. They don't understand what that would do," she whispered. "They kill millions of memories. Not just ours. Theirs, their own." "I know." She looked up. "You have to stop them." He turned to her slowly. "No," he said. "We have to show them what it means to be human." With one final override, Idris activated the cradle's deepest channel, a signal linked directly to Earth, every frequency, every orbit, and then he opened himself, not with weapons, with memory. He allowed the source to pull from him everything. Childhood stories, the soft weight of his daughter sleeping on his chest, the screams of Europa, the grave he dug in a frozen moon with shaking hands, pain and love and choice, and across Earth. Billions of people, for one impossible instant, felt it, not as data, as truth. Idris Harlan, broken and grieving and human, became the bridge between what was and what might be. And in the orbit above Earth, the alien ships changed. Their hulls rippled with color and pattern, no longer just alien memories, but human ones. A Berlin street after winter, a child's laughter echoing through a Martian dome, a violin in a Saturnian outpost, a hand reaching out of a bunker in the last days of the Titan siege. Humanity had entered the web, and the web wept with it. Then the countdown began. Ken's final command, quiet but clear, fire. On Earth, from the Arctic ring array, a neuroweapon charged, invisible, deadly, its sole purpose to scramble quantum-link memory. A clean kill, with no blood. One blast would unravel the web's mind into dust. Idris heard it, felt it. He turned to Mila, heart thundering. "We don't have time." "No," she said, "but we have the memory." And with one last act, she stepped into the source. She turned to Idris, smiled softly. "Tell Leela I remember her." Then she merged, her entire self fusing into the web's core. And the stars screamed with light. The web flared, then sang, and across Earth, the incoming pulse stopped. The weapon failed. It had been disarmed from within, by memory, by Mila, by choice. Idris fell to his knees. The source dimmed, but glowed now with her. Not lost. Transformed, the fleet outside shifted once more, and for the first time, the humans and the web looked at each other and saw not enemies, but reflections. They gathered in the skies like a chorus of the forgotten, the alien fleet once. A drifting grave of memory now shimmered in Earth's orbit like a living monument. Each ship pulsed with light, not of threat, but of remembrance. Not a single weapon fired, no demand made, and below them, Earth stood still. One breath before judgment, one breath before history would break. Idris Harlan stood in the central chamber of the web, knees pressed against the living floor, his hands trembling. Mila was gone, transformed, but her presence was still here, singing through the currents of memory. Every wall hummed with the echo of her, and Idris was not alone. The source, once a silent observer, now shimmered with new consciousness, her consciousness. Mila's voice, fragmented, resonant, came through like wind through stained glass. "It's not over, Idris. They're still afraid." He breathed hard. "They saw it. They felt it. That should have been enough." "No, they saw us. Now you must show them themselves." He looked up, blinking away the tears. "Then take me to the broadcast room." The web extended a corridor, pulsing walls of crystal, and thought uncoiled like a spinal nerve. At the end, a platform, not a command center, not a throne, just a place to speak, to connect. Earth's defense systems were still locked. The Arctic ring stood on edge. The satellites watched with crosshairs open. One wrong word, one hint of subversion, and the sky would burn. Idris stepped onto the platform and spoke, "People of Earth." His voice echoed across every channel. "You don't know me. You don't have to. But you know what I've lost." The system fed his voice into every human ear, augmented with pulses of empathy from the web, not manipulation, but clarity. "I am not here to defend the web. I'm here to tell you what it's shown me, what I never wanted to see again." Images began to flow, not of aliens, of us, of Earth. A billion moments drawn from humanity's shared memory, war and peace, loss and triumph, the ashes and the rebuilding. A mother crying in a burned-out refugee ship, a child planting a flag, made of rags and hope on a dead Martian plane. Soldiers laying down rifles to carry their wounded enemies off shattered ice. Every act of defiance, every miracle born from suffering. This is what they couldn't understand, Idris said, voice rising. They remembered everything except what it means to stand when you've already fallen, to fight with nothing left but memory, to love after death, to choose to hope. The web brightened around him, drawing strength from the truth in his voice. They don't want to replace us. They want to remember with us, because memory isn't weakness. It's our only weapon against the void. A beat of silence. Then, Earth, he said, soft now. Don't answer with fear. Answer with what's always made us more than dust and bone. The final image appeared across every screen on Earth. Leela Harlan, 5 years old, tracing stars on a frozen viewport, smiling. The words beneath her read, "We remember her too." In orbit, the UN's Command Council sat frozen. Ken, silent, watched it all, the images, the voice, the weight behind each syllable, and in her mind echoed one final thought. He never asked for surrender, only understanding. A call came through, no encryption, civilian. It was a child's voice. "Please don't shoot the memory ships." Then another. "I think they're sad." Then thousands, millions, voices rising, children, elders, veterans, scientists, refugees, all speaking in unison. "Let them stay." The vote swept the net like a tidal wave. And Ken, once the iron spine of defense, felt her grip unclench. Slowly, she stood. "Stand down all weapons," she said. "Let memory speak." The alien fleet shifted. Not as attackers, not even as guests, as allies. Ships began descending slowly, trailing light and music, memory blooms spinning from their hulls. They didn't land. They planted themselves in orbit like roots anchored not by gravity, but by trust. The web opened sanctuaries called memory, gardens in lunar orbit and above Pacific skies, not places of worship, but of witnessing. Shared archives, thought chambers, song rooms where Vahari grief and human lullabies wove together. And Adrift scarred, grieving. Stubborn Adrift became the first human to walk the neural bridge between Earth and stars, carrying not a flag, but a name, Leela, in the source. Mila's echo flickered through Adrift's mind once more. There, listening now. He smiled, gaze lifted toward Earth, his voice whispering through the memory field like morning wind. "We didn't save them. We remembered them, and in doing so, we saved ourselves." They used to say the stars were silent. Now, they sing, not with words, not with thunder, but with memory woven into the fabric of light itself, carried across nebulae, stitched into solar wind, broadcast on the breath between planets, and everywhere those echoes go. They carry a name, human. 3 years after the day of joining, Idris Harlan stood beneath Earth's sky again. He hadn't touched soil in over a decade. He'd forgotten the way the wind moved through trees, how the ocean didn't hum like engines, but roared with untamed pulse. But here, in the center of what was once Cape Canaveral, now renamed the Terra Concord site, a new tower rose. Not of glass or steel, of memory crystal and alloy grown from the Webb sea ships. It shimmered with soft light and infinite depth like standing beneath a living aurora. Children played beneath it, human children, Vahari children, hybrid, minds and open hearts, no longer strangers, no longer fragments, just future. He ran a hand along the base, where Mila's name was etched beside 1,000 others. Not martyrs, not saints, witnesses. "Miss her?" asked a voice behind him. Alara Kent stepped forward. No uniform, no medals, just a weathered scarf and quiet eyes. The war room ghosted behind her, replaced by something simpler, a woman who once had the power to end a world, and chose instead to open it. Idris gave a small smile. "Every time I close my eyes." Ken nodded. "I still hear her voice. In the archives, she's not gone." He said softly, "She's become something." The wind lifted. In the distance, a pulse of light flickered from the orbital garden, one of many now grown around Earth. Memory sanctuaries, places where humanity could walk into the minds of 100 lost civilizations and be known and return. "Do you ever wonder," Ken said slowly, "what would have happened if we'd fired?" Idris didn't answer right away. "Then we wouldn't be having this conversation. The stars would still be silent. On Luna, the memory chorus performed nightly. No instruments, no voices, just thought converted into frequency, beamed across the surface in patterns of color and silence. People came from every world to witness it. They didn't always understand, but they felt it. It was never the same performance twice, because memory evolves, just like grief, just like love. Humanity didn't join the web, they changed it. The fusion didn't erase anyone, it enriched all. The web now carried not only ancient laments, but human laughter, resistance, forgiveness. One species taught it how to endure, and the other taught it how to hope. The galaxy began to follow. Fragmented species once thought extinct emerged from hiding. Others reached out for connection, not conquest. Memory became currency. Compassion became diplomacy. And every time someone asked who started it, every ship, every sanctuary, every voice from the web answered the same. The humans remembered. Adrift returned to Titan once before the end, to the place Leela died. He brought no camera, no crew, just silence and a small, palm-sized note grown from the source. He planted it in the scorched soil and whispered, "You can rest now." From that moment forward, the winds over Titan carried her laughter reconstructed, perfect, eternal, not to haunt, but to sing. The final monument wasn't built in orbit. It wasn't made of stone. It wasn't even physical. It was spoken, a phrase etched into every memory node across the web, translated into every known language, and left untouched by time. We were broken, but we were never beaten. And beneath it, one more line. Now, the stars carry our name, far into the future. Long after Adrift Harlan's bones returned to dust and Earth's ocean shifted once more, a child stood inside the memory garden on Kepler 186f, a world once thought unreachable. She was not entirely human, not entirely Vihari, but she wore the old Earth patch on her shoulder. Faded and threadbare, she reached toward the memory field and whispered, "Tell me a story." The web responded. It showed her a planet on the edge of destruction, a soldier filled with loss, an alien fleet, shattered and starving, a woman who became light, and a people who chose to remember, not to destroy. The child smiled and whispered to more words, "Human forward." The web answered with warmth, and the story began again.